All right, so we're a couple of minutes past the hour. Really excited to be here today with my friend Marco Gozun. We're going to be talking about how to drive organizational excellence, basically getting IT insights from a real IT practitioner and manager, somebody who knows the industry in and out. Just kind of a few quick things to set the floor and the agenda. Today, what we're basically going to be doing is speaking with Marco. He's the senior IT manager for Temco Logistics. Marco, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, my name is Marco Gozun. I'm Senior IT Manager at Temco Logistics. I've been with the company for about 3 years now. And yeah, it's been a really, really fun story. I mean, when I came into the company, we had about 12 sites, and now we're pushing 80.
Wow.
So I've got to experience a lot of growth with this company, and experience a lot of growth in myself and my career. So yeah,
We're definitely
it's been a lot of fun.
We're going to dig into that a whole lot more. So to introduce myself, my name is Yoav. I'm the general manager for Atera here in North America. So I sit in New York, which East Coast is obviously the best coast. Lovely to meet everyone. In terms of kind of a few housekeeping rules, so we're recording this webinar. Everybody who is on here or who has registered is going to get a copy of this webinar to be able to view again later. I'm sure that we're going to have such interesting things to say that watching it once is just not going to be enough. You also have your Q&A area here on the top right, probably of your screen. Feel free to ask any questions because we are going to dedicate a portion of this webinar to answering your questions. Really, our goal is to make this session as hands-on as possible. We don't want this to be theoretical discussions in the sky, but really kind of hands-on things that you can take and apply in your businesses right after kind of we end this webinar in an hour or so. So in terms of the agenda, there's four rough parts to it. The first one, we're going to be talking about the IT landscape. So we're going to try and take kind of a 10,000-foot view of what's happening in the world of IT. We're going to talk a little bit about the challenges, the opportunities, the risks, how things are changing. Then we're going to take it a level down and talk about kind of key strategies. So we're going to talk about kind of what are the best practices, what are the things that Marco's seeing success with at Temco. And from there, we're going to dive into kind of very tactical, what does a day in the life look like? How do you stay on top of what's going on in the industry? What is it like? What are you doing with the different kind of IT tech stack that you're using? Terra, of course, included. And then we're going to get to that Q&A. So that's roughly kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So to kick us off, and as we think about this evolving IT landscape, Marco, you just mentioned you've been in the world of IT for a while. Can you tell us a little bit, when you kind of take a step back and want to see the forest for the trees, where are we? Kind of what are the biggest trends, threats, opportunities that you're seeing in the IT space generally?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you were saying, the tech world is just constantly evolving. I mean, you've got Wi-Fi 7 coming out now. I heard they're already developing Wi-Fi 8. The amount of threats that are involved in this landscape. I mean, I was reading somewhere that the amount of money that companies have paid towards ransomware has exceeded like $100 billion already this year. So it's just kind of crazy. And I think it's really important, with all that being said, to just kind of stay on top. Always just, read articles, be aware of what's out there, and just stay up to date with everything as much as you can.
How would you say kind of, that what are the biggest challenges maybe that have changed over the last kind of, let's call it 3 to 5 years? You mentioned ransomware, and I'm guessing that that's a number that continues to grow. But as you look at kind of the state of IT, where it was 3 to 5 years ago, compared to where it is today, kind of what are those biggest changes when you think about it from a technology perspective, from a threat perspective? I mean, I'm sure AI, which we're going to probably be talking about a lot, is a big change. But what else has kind of changed? What has changed over these last few years?
I think it's just the approach that people are taking towards it. I mean, especially with a lot of these threats, there's still people that don't really understand. Like, they get an email and, oh, I want a free coffee. Like, let me click this link, right? And not a lot of people really can read into suspicious emails or anything like that. And and that's really all that they need. Just one little loophole to get in, and they're before you know it, they're attacking your network. So it's you just kind of got to be aware and make sure that your people are aware. So make sure that your company is enforcing like we have a know before training, right? And it just ensures that once a month, our all of our employees are taking these classes that kind of keeps it in their head every month, right? So they're just aware.
I'm guessing, there's only so much we can do with technology, right? You mentioned here that it's very much, the people which are involved are a big part of it because, you know, even the finest net is going to let some things through, and ultimately kind of educating our end users about the threats out there is crucial. So you mentioned that, Temco once a month, you're getting everyone. Is that something that your team is doing? Kind of, are you expected to also educate people today about the threats of kind of cyber attacks or everything else that's going on out there?
Right. Yeah, so we have monthly cybersecurity training for any employee that has access to email, and
Mhm.
that's really just to protect ourselves. And we had to kind of start enforcing a policy where if you're not doing your training, your access will be blocked temporarily until you get that done.
How were the effect of that? I mean, I'm sure that there were some very unhappy people which gave you constant excuses about why they couldn't come to that specific event because their child's dog's homework was eaten by their cat. But has that had a material impact, having those kind of, let's call it sanctions?
No, it was kind of a rough start, but I would say that we've been doing it for about a year now, and now we have regional managers and general managers reaching out to us asking for the exceptions list so that they can approach those people and tell them, hey, you need to get this done before the month ends.
Has that been most effective in terms of basically getting the managers involved and making sure that they're holding their teams accountable? Kind of, you're basically educating, but having somebody else kind of enforce for those kind of which are probably listening to us right now in the webinar and thinking about how they do this in their business. Can you tell us a little bit about how that went on? How did you get that buy-in from those managers?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, one, they want their people to be able to work, right? And
Right.
then two, and I think that a lot of IT departments are traditionally like very introverted, like they don't really care to talk to people. They prefer to be behind the scenes,
Right.
right? And whereas I kind of have this approach where I have no problem talking to these managers, and I explain to all of them why it's important and why we do this kind of stuff, like the potential risk that we could be putting our company in. And I mean, at that point, it was easy buy-in from everybody.
I think that's a key point. I mean, I think that, enforcing through sanctions is one part of it. And, it obviously works. If you're locking people out of their computers, then obviously they're going to do what they need to get back in so that they can keep their jobs. But I think that really getting that buy-in from managers so that they understand what's at risk here and how this could impact their team, the company at large, I think is really crucial. And I think that kind of, that leads me into a question of how are you seeing roles on your team evolve? Kind of when you think about your team, are there roles that you have today that you didn't have 2 or 3 years ago? Kind of where is the emphasis right now inside your team and how has that changed?
Yeah, yeah, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the amount of growth that our company has been experiencing over the last few years. So uh, when I started, it was me and two other guys, and to date, we have about six technicians and um, a director above myself, a CIO, a CISO that we recently hired. So we have to make sure that we're able to scale,
Mhm.
and we've built a solid team to where everybody had their own little niche of what they specialized in, and that's continuing to expand. My cloud specialist is now becoming probably one of our better um, security experts on the team.
Hmm.
So whereas um, probably in the next year, I mean, he's probably going to take on both sides or possibly hand the cloud specialist title off to somebody else. Um, but yeah, we do prefer to promote from within. So it's we've seen our telecom analyst is very close to becoming like our network administrator, you know. So we like to foster our people, you know, that I just
Hmm.
want to have this environment where we all work together on projects, but at the same
Hmm.
time we're making sure that we develop people for, you know, their future roles, whatever they want to pursue in their careers, right? And that's really what I'm trying to get out with this team, and it's worked out phenomenally.
That's wonderful. It sounds like you've opted to take a path of specialization. You mentioned kind of cloud specialist. So was that always the case? Kind of what we see is there are teams where there's generalists and everybody's kind of doing everything. You've got teams where there's a little bit of a deeper specialization. Kind of, can you share a little bit about kind of why you guys decided to go the route that you did, and kind of have you seen good impact from that?
That was that had a lot to do with the fact that we were so small when we started out. Our cloud specialist was probably the fourth guy to join our team, and he was already in the middle of going through, you know, his certifications for Google and Microsoft, and um, it just he just ended up being the the best guy for that job. So it was something that kind of fell onto him, and it worked out. It worked out great. Um, but that is kind of how we start a lot of people off, is that they'll either already have a specific knowledge base that we're in need of,
Hmm.
and then from there, like if they want to pursue something else, we'll absolutely help them work towards that goal. Uh, or you know, we've start most people off like in a general aspect at the support desk, just handling tickets, and that gives them an opportunity to not only learn basically the landscape of our company and a lot
Hmm.
of a lot of ins and outs of networking that they didn't know before, right? They gain a lot of knowledge doing uh, the support tickets because they they just want to find a resolution. So a lot of times they're reaching out to the cloud specialist, like, hey, I'm having this issue, you know, can you help me with that? So they gain a lot of knowledge in that process, and it's a good developmental um, way to start out in this industry.
So does everyone go through that? Meaning, kind of, do you have everyone go through a stint on the service desk? Is that something that you guys do continually? Kind of, what does that look like? Is because you talked a lot about developing your team, and I think that that's one of the things which is very unique and special at Temco is the emphasis that you're putting on developing the team. But is that how does that work? Kind of give us a little bit of if I'm thinking about how to develop my IT team, what have you done that's worked?
Yeah. So um, I have one technician, and he was hired earlier this year. He he left his previous company. It was kind of a friend referral, right? And he he wanted to be in cybersecurity. And I told him, like, we don't really have like a full on job for that yet, just because of our size and everything. But you're gonna get some experience in it, right? And if you're willing to kind of grind it out and spend some time doing support desk, I can absolutely help you get to where you want to be. And that worked out. Actually, the guy before him aspired to be a developer. So he spent probably a year and a half doing support tickets before a position opened up in our business intelligence department. And uh, at that point, they were reaching out, already kind of testing him, like giving him homework assignments. And this guy, he grinded, and now he's there. So it's really just understanding what your employees want, because I just want to keep our employees as happy as possible. That way we can have some level of retention, right? Because I don't
That's
want to have to
exactly
go.
what I was going to ask.
Yeah, yeah. So
You
retention
mentioned something
is
really
huge
interesting,
for
Marco.
us.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you mentioned something kind of really interesting here, which is on the one hand, you're putting this emphasis on retention, and we all know that the current state of IT is very difficult, right? Keeping people in IT roles is challenging. Hiring for IT roles is challenging. And on the one hand, talking about retention. On the other hand, you're talking about investing in your team members, even when you know that it may actually mean that they end up leaving the team to do something else. And I think that that's a really, really interesting insight of, come here because, hey, we're going to help you grow and develop, and that might be here and it might be elsewhere, but you're getting really good people to join and stay. So I think that's definitely a really, really great tip, which I hope everyone's listening to. Let's switch gear a little bit. I want to kind of move on to the next topic that we're here to talk about today, and that's a little bit getting deeper into strategies for IT excellence. So I think, to start with the most general question, what are your best practices? Kind of, you're managing this team and you're looking at IT management operations generally. What are the best practices that you would recommend to anybody who's running a team?
Definitely to my last point is focus on the people, right? If you can build a team that you're fostering, you're developing, you have trust in, then it's going to make your life a lot easier, right? And then another thing is definitely implement systems that promote standardization and efficiency. So if your tech stack is, um, solid, you have a good RMM, a good SIM platform, you know, network monitoring, all that stuff, just automate everything, and it's great. All you have to do is just go through and make sure that everybody's operational, everybody's um, making money for the business.
Marco, so before we kind of dive into software, what I wanted to ask you before, you talked about the growth of your team, right? And you said that you were the third person on the team. Today, it sounds like there's close to 6 or 7 people. Can you also give us an idea for how many endpoints were you monitoring back in the day compared to where you are today? Meaning, has the team grown linearly as the company has grown? Have you been able to reach economies of scale through automation, through tools? What does that actually look like for you guys?
Um, well, we've actually been able to keep the team extremely lean, all things considered. Um,
Mhm.
Not to say that we're not stretched thin, because that's definitely not the case. But uh, I do expect to um, have a big year of growth for next year.
Mhm.
So I mean, as far as growing with the company and having like a specific tech to end user ratio, like we really haven't done that. It's all kind of been reaching out to leadership, like, hey, we're dying, we need more people. So
And I
that's
think that
kind
that
of the approach that has been, and we're trying to kind of plan things out a little better. It's um we're trying to standardize that kind of stuff a little better on our end.
when you look at IT budgets, right, and you look at you kind of describe the situation which we hear so very often, which is IT turns around to the business and says, "Hey guys, you're expecting a lot of us. More and more's happening. There's more devices. There's more things going on in the world. There's more risk. There's more threats." Usually, the budgets are not necessarily growing at the same pace as the types of things that your organization is expected to cover and expected to cover excellently. And I think that, you talked about two main components: team, which we've talked a little bit about your approach to the team, and then the software side. Now, we are on an Atera webinar, so I'm going to guess that, you're a fan of Atera, but I'd love to hear kind of both on the Atera side, but also generally, what does your IT software stack look like? What are your recommendations? You touched on a few of them, but if you're willing to get into a little bit more detail, that would be wonderful just for everybody on the webinar, which is looking to build kind of that ideal tech stack, which will make them the most efficient.
Yeah, sure. Um, so since most of our team is based out of uh, a building in Pomona, California. We've set up ways for us to have as little touch to our devices as we deploy them. So I mean, we're basically purchasing them from Dell, shipping them to a warehouse, and then just sending that warehouse the shipping addresses so that they get everything out. And we have our tech stack currently set up to just automatically log it into the domain using autopilot, and users are ready to go from there. Just so the first thing that it installs, autopilot installs, is the Atera agent, and that kind of kicks things off with all the scripts and everything, just making sure that the configuration is up to date as soon as possible. So after some updating and a couple reboots, they're usually ready to fly in a matter of like 30 to 60 minutes. Domots, I know we get that through Atera, and that is actually a great network monitoring tool. We have a screen that's up, and also Slack notifications to let us know if anything goes wrong. So that's a really good one to have. I like Firewalla because you're able to have basically a failover option. We have a cell backup in every building now, and that's also a pretty nice feature to have. And still working through the NAC and SIM options right now. We're still shopping around there, but I think we're pretty close to narrowing that down.
Awesome. As you kind of, when we think about a day in your life, and specifically a day in your life perhaps with Atera, can you talk to us a little bit about, demos are great and the website's great, but when you use Atera, what are the things that you're using? How are you actually utilizing, and what's really the value that you're seeing from using Atera?
Man, so one of the biggest things about the industry these days is we are in an age of AI, right? It's so advanced these days. So that was something that really turned me on towards Atera, was the fact that it's AI integrated. And probably the most valuable part of that is not only do we have it integrated for ourselves as the IT team, but the end users as well also have an AI chatbot that can, basically an AI assistant that can help them, like, hey, my computer's slow, and right away the bot's already giving them, remedies or something like that to try and help fix their issue. So a lot of times that can end up being basically another technician to kind of answer the really easy questions, right? Whether it's hardware related or I try to make it a point to keep our knowledge base as up to date as possible, because as soon as the AI picks up on those keywords, it's, oh, I think you're talking about your TC75 scanner. Like, here's what I know about it, and that can also provide a lot of value for our end users, because if we're backed up on tickets and they're going through the chatbot to get a resolution to their issue, they could potentially be saving themselves a lot of time, because being in a small team, we can't always help users right away, and a lot of users really expect that assistance right away.
Absolutely. It's interesting because one of the things that we often talk about when we talk about our AI and autopilot and copilot, we talk about this idea of being able to liberate both sides of the ticket. Because for the end user, as you said, they want it right away. And if their computer's running slowly, or they can't connect to a printer, or they're locked out, or they need a piece of software that they don't have, they need it now, or they needed it 5 minutes ago when they understood that they have a problem. So being able to solve that problem for them, of course, a ton of value for the end user, but also for the technician, right? And you've talked a lot about your team and developing them and giving them the skills that they need. I've never met an IT professional that told me that they wish that they could reset more passwords, or they wish that they could spend more time helping people restart their computers after they told them that they have, but they really haven't. So I think, what we're seeing is somewhere between 20 to 30% of tier one tickets are actually able to be completely solved by the AI. And I think that the value there, of course, is quicker response times and it's quicker resolution times, but also for the IT teams, right? Giving them the technicians themselves, the people in these teams, giving them the ability to work on higher value projects is something that, that's part of our mission, right? To empower them, to make them the superheroes. And especially as we think about, the budgets which aren't growing at the same rate of the needs that are coming from the IT team. So Marco, kind of, what are your tips as you think about day-to-day management outside of what we've talked about? You mentioned a couple of pieces of software. We talked a little bit about kind of Atera, particularly with the emphasis on the AI. But what are your tips for somebody right now who's managing a team? Kind of what are the things that they should be keeping top of mind right now?
Well, again, people, people, people. I think building a diverse team that meshes well, but also, the diversity is important, right? Because if everybody's an AWS expert, they're not necessarily going to really be helping build each other up because they've got the same knowledge. But yeah, I would say that the team and development of that team is probably the most important part about managing one. Because if you keep them happy, you make sure that you give them that ability to grow with the company and within the company. It's only going to pay dividends later. So that's the biggest thing I would say. And um, maybe help guide them through to reach their goals. Like if I know that somebody wants to become a cybersecurity expert, like, hey, maybe we can help get you this certification to come, just to kind of give you a little extra background knowledge and see whether it's something that you really want to pursue on a day-to-day basis. So that's in my opinion, that's what it really comes down to, is just the team building and development.
Marco, kind of, how do you stay on top? We talked about this at the very, very beginning, but what are your recommendations for somebody that, you mentioned things are evolving, things are changing? How do you stay on top? Are there any specific newsletters that you're reading? Are there any publications that you find particularly useful? Kind of what would you recommend to everybody who's kind of on this webinar? How can you stay ahead of the game?
Yeah. I mean, easy ones are subscribing to any IT newsletter, right? A lot of people like IT Brew. I personally use TLDR and Bleeping Computer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we've actually got a Slack channel within our group that just posts the Bleeping Computer articles as they go up, and that's pretty cool because you know while we're working, we're getting notifications. And most of the time, I'm just reading the headlines, like, "Oh, that's pretty crazy." Um, that's pretty good. And then I also like to follow a lot of tech pages on social media. Um, there's a lot out there, and there's one page that I follow. I think it's called NPR. But this guy, he's posts a lot of gaming stuff, but also a lot of AI related stuff, and it really it's really mind blowing because he's always posting the latest and greatest, right? Like some of the craziest stuff you'll see out there.
Yeah.
And there was one video that I saw recently where the videos are so realistic, and they're just generating videos of celebrities and stuff like that, and it legitimately looks like Morgan Freeman speaking to you. It actually sounds like Morgan Freeman, And he cuts over and he's just like, nope, this is AI. So in that regard, it could be used for good. It could be used for scary stuff, but um, yeah, it's pretty nuts.
Yeah, it really calls into question the whole nature of what is truth? What are we even seeing? How do we know that we can even trust what we're looking at? And I don't know if you saw, but there was an article this morning about some of the new models that OpenAI seems to be on the verge of releasing. Strawberry apparently is one of them, and Orion. And there's a lot of rumors floating around in terms of what they can and can't do. But it sounds like in our world, particularly, that they're going to be releasing some very interesting capabilities when it comes to things like coding and creative coding. At least that's what I've read. So I don't know if you've had a chance to see anything or if there was anything that jumped out to you.
Um, what jumped out to me this morning was I think that it was OpenAI, and I think that they're trying to source additional investment from their investors, and I think they're pushing a net worth of like 150 billion. It's crazy.
Crazy, crazy. I remember when Instagram was acquired for $1 billion, and we all thought that that was a lot of money, and that wasn't all
Yeah.
that long ago.
Oh my
But
gosh. Yeah.
it definitely looks like the opportunity is so massive. And I think that when we think about the AI hype cycle, right, we're reaching a point where we're starting to see real applications, right? You just talked about them, about things that you're doing today with AI that you couldn't do a year ago or 2 years ago. So it's exciting, it's scary, it shows that the future is going to be very, very different. I think probably in ways that we couldn't imagine, right? If I would have told you a couple of years ago that your end users would be able to solve the fact that their computers are running slowly on their own without having a one-to-one ratio between tickets and technicians, I mean, would you have believed me?
No.
Wild stuff. Okay, I want to shift kind of to the third segment before we open it up for Q&A. And just as a reminder, if you do have any questions for Marco or myself, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. And we're going to get to them. I see that Josh has already added one question, so please throw more questions in there. So, Marco, can you tell us a little bit about does a day in your life actually look like? You talked a lot about the team, you talked a lot about the specialization, subject matter expert, but if you had to give me a typical day in your life, what does it look like? What are you doing when you come in the morning?
Uh, Typical day. I mean, being on the West Coast, I wake up, I just check on the East Coast. I have one technician over there, so as long as he's good, like sometimes I'll jump in if he's having a busy morning. If he's got it under control, I'll go ahead and uh, run some errands before getting into the office. But yeah, a lot of times it really varies just because there's so many different projects and so many things going on. And from the senior manager seat, I'm just trying to make sure that all of the projects are uh, going to be completed on time. If I need to step in and support in any way that I can, I mean, I'm still jumping in and doing tickets every day, just to help keep it at a
To
manageable
stay
level
to stay
for.
fighting fit, right? Also to keep yourself sharp.
Yeah, yeah, that as well. But I mean, I've got two technicians that are dedicated to tickets, so just helping them make sure that it doesn't get out of hand to where things are falling through the cracks or anything like that. Um, I definitely will assist with that. But I try to keep my focus on the forward thinking, right? Ensuring that um, any projects in the future that we have, I'm planning out for that. What's the roadmap? What's the timeline? Uh, and it's important to have at least somebody on the team, whether it's the director or the CIO, like um, kind of looking at it from that perspective, just focusing on the big picture and ensuring that everybody's on the same page, right?
Absolutely. So Marco, as we think about kind of Temco and Atera, you talked a little bit earlier about some of the things that you guys are doing with AI, getting that Atera agent installed. But do you have any specific use cases that you can share with us, or any success stories of things that you guys have done inside Temco using Atera in order to provide kind of better outcomes for the team?
Yeah, I think that I spoke a little bit to it earlier, but the deployment of the customer portal was probably the biggest help for our team because it was kind of like gaining an additional technician, right? Um, because the end users they'll have the AI assistant, but they also have a self-service portal where they can go in and download and install any approved software um, that we as the IT team have put into there. Um, they can monitor their own tickets, so it'll be easy for them to be like, hey, what's the status of this one? I'm just following up here, right? Um, but the AI assistant is probably my favorite because it doesn't necessarily create a ticket right away, but if it's out of the AI's control, it'll escalate to my team. But I do prefer that our end users and the adaptation's going pretty well, right? A lot of users are starting to use that more and more. We're really getting our deployment team when we open new buildings to kind of um, insist that they try that out before just sending an email to IT
Yeah.
support because it could save them and ourselves a lot of time. So
Yeah,
kind of a win-win.
I think that that's probably the biggest adoption concern that we hear is people aren't going to use this. People are so used to emailing us or calling us or in the worst cases walking up to our desk demanding a solution. So I'm just curious, kind of, you mentioned when you open a new building, but what are some things that you did to get people to adopt kind of Atera's AI to solve their own problems? Was it about talking to them about the benefits? Was it in the same way that you guys are enforcing the training, saying, hey, no access to your laptops if you're not using the assistant, which we would of course endorse? But kind of what's worked for you?
Um, so what helped us the most was just starting with like the executive level and regional manager level. We started with them and just kind of did a little demo for them, and from there we just sent out a company-wide email, and that it kind of went through like the benefits of utilizing it. And it was actually right after we had a workshop with with some of our friends over at Atera. So they had prepared like this really nice sheet with like an embedded video and everything, just to kind of make it real easy because some users don't like to read, so they have that embedded video that just kind of shows them like, hey, here's how to use this. So they like that, and that really helped the adoption rate a lot.
That, I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you for specific numbers, but is that something that you guys have been able to see kind of a change in, meaning the number of tickets that get to a technician or the average resolution time? Kind of how are you monitoring and actually making sure that this is making an impact?
Um, well, that kind of goes into uh, we did some analysis with Ellie, one of you guys' engineers, and he kind of went through the stats of, okay, this is how many tickets are being opened with the AI, and then this is how many are being escalated to technicians. This is how many are actually being resolved by the AI. So I actually really love that. We're meeting, they're doing these analysis, and just we're constantly trying to improve um, the performance of it just on a team level because I mean um, we're we're purchasing a service from Atera, but we're also acting as it's like a partnership. You get like that community aspect from it. It's really nice.
Love to
So
hear it.
yeah, I have like bi-weekly meetings with Ellie, and we just kind of go through that stuff. And he'll have specific requests. We'll provide any feedback that we get on it. So yeah, it's a constant work in progress. And I have a pretty good feeling that we have a bright future.
Wonderful to hear. Marco, we're gonna kind of take some questions that people have put here in the Q&A. So let me kind of start off by asking you, one, the most important thing Travis is asking is, can we see the rest of your, yeah, that's a very cool sweatshirt. And I'm gonna turn off the screen share just so everybody can get a real look at that. There you go. There you go. That's a cool sweatshirt. We're actually selling the sweatshirt in the swag shop. I'm joking. We're not selling the sweatshirt, but maybe we can. But that's not what we're going to do. In any case, Marco. So Josh T is asking, what's the biggest pain in being a manager at your company?
Non-tech
Comment.
savvy users. Yeah, we've had some problems, not problems, but occurrences with non-tech savvy users, and one of them, like, he would get in like a weekly fight with the AI chatbot. And I think it was mostly because like he didn't really understand the capabilities, maybe, or maybe even that he was talking to a chatbot, right?
Right.
But he would tell the chatbot like, "Hey, I need this," and he'd get a response, "I need this right now. Don't you know who I am?" So
But
yeah,
no, I don't.
it's that kind of attitude that we'll go back and we'll read through it. We'll put it into our group chat like, "Hey, I think this guy's having some issues." But
Yeah. We need to
yeah,
escalate this to a human.
yeah, yeah. That's usually where we pick up.
For sure. I see a question here from Mark, who's asking, kind of for somebody who's coming up through the ranks in the world of IT, how different is it to be a manager versus a technician?
Well, you get some additional responsibilities, like if one of your technicians messes something up, you kind of have to have that conversation. So that can be kind of tough. I mean, tough conversations they're not easy to have. I've never liked them personally, but they have to happen, right? That's probably what I struggled with most as, coming up through the ranks. And then the other thing is just understanding, especially in a corporate landscape, uh, how to navigate through politics. Because I mean, as much as we like or dislike it, it's just part of it.
I think that I was just having this conversation the other day, but being a manager is essentially getting the credit for nothing and being at fault for everything, right? When things are going well, then it's because, whoever it is did a fantastic job. When things are going badly, it's your responsibility for not putting in the infrastructure. And I think that it's true of being a manager really in any role. You need to really care about the success of others. You need to really be willing to make their problems your problems, make their successes your successes. And I think that shift, both in technical roles and in non-technical roles, right? I'm in a non-technical role myself, but that move is always challenging. You also lose control of your success, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're an individual contributor, if you do a good job, that's good enough. But being a manager, you can do a great job. But if people on your team are not doing a great job, then ultimately the responsibility stops with you. And I think that's really true across any type of management.
Absolutely.
I see we have a comment that Josh loves fighting with AI, which we definitely endorse. As we kind of think about next question here, which we got from I'm guessing it's Jean or maybe Jean, but I don't know. It's one of those two. And the question was, how does one expand with more clientele? Where does one start? I'm not sure that I understand the question. Marco, do you?
Clientele, like from an MSP perspective, or
Jean or Jean, if you're still on the call, please drop more context, and we're happy to answer your questions. We're going to move on to Travis's question, come back to you. So Travis asks, how did you handle onboarding end users and familiarizing them with the service? Because they haven't opened up AI to their users.
Right. So the easiest thing that we could do was we installed a desktop icon on everybody's computer, and it's gold. Really stands out compared to everything else. So that and we call it Temco IT AI. So I think it's pretty hard to miss when that comes up on your computer, and most people kind of just take it from there. They'll see that, oh, hey, what's this?
Have you had luck in using different strategies to motivate people to adopt it? Because you're right? People will notice it, but getting them to adopt it, and adoption is typically the hardest part. How do you get buy-in? You talked before about going to the executive team, but did you guys do anything particular with the end users as well to try to get them to engage?
We'll throw suggestions in, like if somebody's manually opening a ticket, like by sending an IT support email, right? Hey, I need the dial pad application installed. And, especially if we're busy at the moment, we'll instruct them like, hey, go ahead and open up the Temco IT AI desktop icon, and under self-service, you can install it right from there.
Yeah.
And especially if it's usually the managers of the end user that are opening these tickets, because they already kind of have some sort of established relationship with our team. So that's kind of how it just ends up picking up traction and moving along.
Makes sense. And there's a comment here, which is 95% of our users send emails for tickets. That's our struggle point for sure. And I'd say that that's very, very common, right? I think that we see that, there's a famous saying of everybody wants change, but nobody wants to change. So theoretically, people like the idea of AI, but then when it comes down to it, like, hey, I don't want to use this. I'm used to doing things in a certain way. And what we've found to be successful in helping organizations adopt practices like this is being very focused on what's the value for them. It's not, hey, we don't want to deal with your ticket, but it's, if you use the AI, you don't need to wait, and you're going to get a resolution immediately. So if you don't send an email, but you go into the portal, we can solve your problem immediately, right? We can get this done for you immediately. You don't have to wait. And I think, one of the things you talked about before, I'm not sure if you've played around with this, is using the knowledge base to build the intelligence of the AI, but also using the AI to build the intelligence. So for example, if you've resolved a ticket inside Atera today, you can hit create knowledge base article, and it automatically summarizes the ticket, looks at the resolution, looks at what was done, steps that were taken, puts that into the knowledge base, where the advantage there is that if this comes up again, the AI knows how to reference that. And really the idea is to be able to make it easier for that end user, so that everything is being done, as much as possible is being done autonomously, right? Particularly with these more straightforward things, we want to make it as easy as possible so that they get their resolution as quickly as possible. So great, thank you for that. So Jean mentioned that the question was about MSPs. So how does one expand with more clientele, and where does one start? So Marco, do you have any insights on that?
I don't. We are an internal IT team, and I was speaking with a friend of a friend who had noticed the post on LinkedIn of this webinar. So he sent it to his friend, and his friend sent it to me, and he ended up putting us in contact, because this guy was basically in kind of a similar situation where he's starting up his own MSP right now, and just kind of trying to gain some clientele and business. But as far as insight, I mean, I got nothing. It's really just I would say networking your way through it. Yeah.
I think what we see, and we've got a few thousand MSPs using Atera. What's been successful for a lot of people is having a niche, and you would be surprised how nichey things can get. And as long as there's a market in that niche, then there's a lot of value. Right? We've seen, without giving away names, but we've seen MSPs which are super focused on dental practices. We've seen MSPs which specialize in sports teams. We've seen MSPs which specialize in auditoriums and kind of places which have shows. So I think that niche and really specializing, as long as that niche has enough in it to sustain the real business, that's kind of what we've seen, which actually works really well. There's a super loaded question here, which I'm going to throw at you, Marco, which is, what's the better job down the line in 5 years' time? Do I go internal IT department in an enterprise company, or do I start my own business as an MSP?
Ooh,
A lot of responsibility
that's a
here.
tough one. Yeah, yeah, that's a tough one. Um, I do like the internal IT department route, just because I mean I'm kind of within a company that I do see a lot of opportunity and just growth. So at this point, I'm sticking to my guns. I'm sticking around, but I think it's all circumstantial, right?
Sure.
Based on your preferences, how you like to work with people. Uh, Personally, I love talking to people. That's something that I think I do well. So with that, I mean, yeah, it's kind of a tough one.
It's a tough one. Personal preference, definitely, right? Very different environments. I think that, one of the things that we see as an MSP, right? Your revenue generation is IT, so it's a revenue center, right? It's ultimately that's how you make money. Whereas an internal IT department, for better or worse, you're a cost center, right? And you're making things more efficient, and it's all true. But ultimately, you're not bringing in dollars. By the way, great cameo of the dog just behind you over there. That was great. But internal IT departments, a
She's
little bit more of a
restless.
cost center. Just a very, very different mindset, right? I think that in the world of MSPs,
Right.
different models, break fix, whatever it is, but ultimately you're generating dollars for every minute you're spending. IT departments, a little bit different, more strategic, right? There's a lot of changeover when you look at MSPs, right? Their shelf life is typically not particularly long. So advantages and disadvantages to each one. We're 5 minutes before the end. I don't see any other questions. So if anybody has questions for Marco, this is your last chance. Marco, do you have any parting thoughts for the kind people who spend their either breakfast or lunch with us?
Um, well, I would just say put in the work. Uh, you know, get in good with your people, and stay true to your guns, and things will work out.
And use AI. Marco, it's always a pleasure chatting with you, man. And this has been really, really insightful. And hopefully it's given everybody that's spent an hour with us. And I see Jean or Jean is mentioning that it's dinner time in Europe. And that's right. So breakfast on the West Coast, lunch on the East Coast, dinner in Europe. Thank you, everybody, for spending time with us today. We really appreciate you being here. Please do feel free to reach out to us. I'm not sure if I have a slide with our emails on it. I do not. But anybody that wants, we will be sharing kind of our details with you afterwards. Thank you for the time. Have a wonderful day. Marco, thank you again, and we'll see you all very soon.